Well, by the gods, here we are again. Mama T got cut off by iPhone storage. Eternally inefficient, just like Schmendrick in the story. Am I right? So here we are, continuing on with chapter 9 of Peter Beagle's The Last Unicorn. The second sentinel stared down from his tower at the three wanderers. The tall man saw him first, and next the dour woman. Their eyes reflected nothing but his armour, grim and cankered and empty. But then the girl in the ruined black cloak raised her head, and he stepped back from the parapet, putting out one tin glove against her glance. In a moment she passed into the shadow of the castle with her companions, and he lowered his hand. She may be mad, he said calmly. No grown girl looks like that unless she is mad. That would be annoying, but far preferable to the remaining possibility, which is, the younger man prompted after a silence, which is that she was indeed born this morning. I would rather that she were mad. Let us go down now. When the man and the women reached the castle, the two sentries were standing on either side of the gate, their blunt bent halberds crossed and their falchions hitched round in front of them. The sun had gone down, and their absurd armour grew steadily more menacing as the sea faded. The travellers hesitated, looking at one another. They had no dark castle at their backs, and their eyes were not hidden. "Give me your names," said the parched voice of the second sentinel. The tall man stepped a pace forward. "I am Schmendrick, the magician," he said. "This is Molly Grew, my helper, and this is the lady Amalthea." He stumbled over the name of the white girl as though he had never before spoken it. "We seek audience with King Haggard," he continued. "We have come a long way to see him." The second sentinel waited for the first to speak, but the younger man was looking only at the lady Amalthea. Impatiently he said, "State your business with King Haggard." "I will," the magician replied, "to Haggard himself. What kind of royal matter could it be that I might confide to doormen and porters? Take us to the king." What kind of royal matter could a wandering wizard with a foolish tongue have to discuss with King Haggard? The second sentinel asked somberly. But he turned and strode through the castle gate, and the king's visitors straggled after him. Last wandered the younger sentinel, his step grown as tender as that of the lady Amalthea, whose every movement he imitated unaware. She stayed a moment before the gate, looking out to the sea, and the sentinel did the same. His former comrade called angrily to him, but the young sentry was on a different duty, answerable to a new captain for his derelictions. He entered at the gate only after the lady Amalthea had chosen to go in. Then he followed, singing to himself in a dreamy drone. What is it that is happening to me? What is it that is happening to me? I cannot tell whether to be glad or be afraid. What is it that is happening to me? They crossed a cobbled courtyard where cold laundry groped their faces and passed through a smaller door into a hall so vast that they could not see the walls or the ceiling in the darkness. Great stone pillars rushed up to them as they trudged across the hall and then leaned away without ever really letting themselves be seen. Breath echoed in that huge place, and the footsteps of other smaller creatures sounded just as clearly as their own. Molly Grew stayed quite close to Schmendrick. After the great hall, there came another door and then a thin stair. There were few windows and no lights. The stair coiled tighter and tighter as it ascended until it seemed that every step turned round on itself and that the tower was closing on them all like a sweaty fist. The darkness looked at them and touched them. It had a rainy, doggy smell. Something rumbled somewhere deep and near. The tower trembled like a ship run aground and answered with a low stone wail. The three travellers cried out, scrambling to keep their feet on the shuddering stairs, but their guide pressed on without faltering or speaking. The younger man whispered earnestly to the Lady Amalthea, "It's all right. Don't be afraid. It's just the bull." The sound was not repeated. The second sentinel halted abruptly, produced a key from a secret place and jabbed it, apparently, straight into the blank wall. A section of the wall swung inward, and the small procession filed into a low, narrow chamber with one window and a chair at the far end. There was nothing else, no other furnishings, no rug, no draperies, no tapestries. In the room were 5 people, the tall chair and the merely light of the rising new moon. "This is King Haggard's throne room," said the sentinel. The magician gripped him by his mailed elbow and turned him until they faced each other. "This is a cell. This is a tomb. No living king sits here. Take us to Haggard if he is alive." "You must judge that for yourself," replied the scurrying voice of the sentinel. He unlaced his helmet and lifted it from his grey head. "I am King Haggard," he said. His eyes were the same colour as the horns of the red bull. He was taller than Schmendrick, and though his face was bitterly lined, there was nothing fond or foolish in it. It was a pike's face, the jaws long and cold, the cheeks hard, the lean neck alive with power. He might have been 70 years old, or 80, or more. The first sentinel came forward now, with his own helmet under his arm. Molly Grew gaped when she saw his face, for it was the friendly, rumpled face of the young prince who had read a magazine while his princess tried to call a unicorn. King Haggard said, "This is Lear." "Hi," said Prince Lear. "Glad to meet you." His smile wriggled at their feet like a hopeful puppy, but his eyes, a deep, shadowy blue behind stubby lashes, rested quietly on the eyes of the Lady Amalthea. She looked back at him, silent as a jewel, seeing him no more truly than men see unicorns. But the prince felt strangely, happily certain that she had looked him round and through, and down into caverns that he had never known were there, where her glance echoed and sang. Prodigies began to waken somewhere southwest of his 12th rib, and he himself, still mirroring the Lady Amalthea, began to shine. "What is your concern with me?" Schmendrick the magician cleared his throat and bowed to the pale-headed old man. "We seek to enter your service. Far and wide has the fabled court of King Haggard. I need no servants." The king turned away, his face and body suddenly slack with indifference. Yet Schmendrick sensed a curiosity lingering in the stone-coloured skin and at the roots of the grey hair. He said cautiously, "But surely you keep some some following? Simplicity is the richest adornment of a king, I grant you, but for such a king as Haggard—" "You are losing my interest," the rustling voice interrupted him again. "And that is very dangerous. In a moment I will have forgotten you quite entirely, and will never be able to remember just what I did with you. What I forget not only ceases to exist, but never really existed in the first place." As he said this, his eyes, like those of his son, turned to meet Lady Amalthea's eyes. "My court," he continued, "since you choose to call it that, consists of 4 men-at-arms. I would do without them, if I could, for they cost more than they are worth, like everything else, but they take their turns as sentries and as cooks, and as they give the appearance of an army from a distance. What other attendants should I need?" "But the pleasures of court," the magician cried, "the music, the talk, the women and the fountains, the hunts and the masks, and the great feasts." "They are nothing to me," King Haggard said. "I have known them all, and they have not made me happy. I will keep nothing near me that does not make me happy." The Lady Amalthea moved quietly past him to the window and looked out at the night sea. Schmendrick came about to catch the wind again and declared, "I understand you perfectly. How weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seem to you all the uses of this world. You are bored with bliss, satiated with sensation, jaded with jejune joys. It is a king's affliction, and therefore no one wants the services of a magician more than a king does. For only to a magician is the world forever fluid, infinitely mutable, and eternally new. Only he knows the secret of change. Only he truly knows that all things are crouched in eagerness to become something else. And it is from this universal tension that he draws his power. To a magician, March is May, snow is green, and grass is grey. This is that, or whatever you say. Get a magician today. He finished on one knee with both arms flung wide. King Haggard stepped nervously away from him, muttering, get up, you make my head hurt. Besides, I already have a royal magician. Schmendrick rose heavily to his feet, his face red and empty. You never said. What is his name? He is called Mabruk, King Haggard replied. I do not often speak of him. Even my men at arms do not know that he lives here in the castle. Mabruk is all that you have said a wizard should be, and much more that I doubt you dream of. He is known in his trade as the magician's magician. I can see no reason to replace him with some vagrant, nameless, clownish. Ah, but I can, Schmendrick broke in desperately. I can think of one reason uttered by you yourself not a minute since. This marvellous Mabruk does not make you happy. Over the king's fierce face there fell a slow shadow of disappointment and betrayal. For a breath he looked like a bewildered young man. Why no, that is true, King Haggard murmured. Mabruk's magic has not delighted me for a very long time. How long has it been, I wonder? He clapped his hands briskly, crying out, Mabruk, Mabruk, appear, Mabruk. I am here, said a deep voice from a far corner of the room. I misread that out of synchronicity, but you feel me, babies. An old man in a dark spangled gown and a pointed spangled hat was standing there, and no one could say surely that he had not been standing there in plain sight since they entered the throne room. His beard and brows were white, and the cast of his face was mild and wise, but his eyes were as hard as hailstones. What does your majesty wish of me? Mabruk, King Haggard said, this gentleman is of your fraternity. His name is Schmendrick. The old wizards. Schmendrick in Yiddish means a foolish person, by the way. So I'm very amused by the name of his wizard, his magician. The old wizard's icy eyes widened slightly, and he peered at the shabby man. Why, so it is, he exclaimed in seeming pleasure. Schmendrick, my dear boy, How nice to see you. You won't remember me, but I was a dear, dear friend of your tutor, dear old Nikos. He had such high hopes for you, the poor man. Well, well, this is a surprise. And are you really still in the profession? My, you're a determined fellow. I always say perseverance is 9/10 of any art. Not that it's much help to be 9/10 of an artist, of course, but what can it be that brings you here? He has come to take your place. King Haggard's voice was flat and final. He is now my royal magician. Schmendrick's start of amazement was not lost on old Mabruk, though the wizard himself seemed little surprised by the king's decision. For a moment he obviously considered the worth of wrath, but instead he chose a tone of genial amusement. As your majesty wills it, now and always, he purred, but perhaps your majesty might be interested in learning a bit of the history of his new magician. I'm sure dear Schmendrick won't mind my mentioning that he is already something of a legend in the trade. Indeed, among adepts, he is best remembered as Nikos's folly. His charming and complete inability to master the simplest rune. His creative way with the most childish rhyme of theurgy, let alone. King Haggard made a thin motion with the edge of one hand, and Mabruk was suddenly silent. Prince Lear giggled. The king said, I do not need to be persuaded of his unfitness for the position. A single glance at him tells me that, as a glance makes it plain that you are one of the great wizards of the world. Mabruk swelled gently, fondling his glorious beard and wrinkling his benign brow. But that also is nothing to me, King Haggard went on. In the past you have performed whatever miracle I required of you, and all it has done has been to spoil my taste for miracles. No task is too vast for your powers, and yet, when the wonder is achieved, nothing has changed. It must be that great power cannot give me whatever it is that I really want. A master magician has not made me happy. I will see what an incompetent one can do. You may go, Mabruk. He nodded his head to dismiss the old wizard. Mabruk's semblance of affability vanished like a spark on snow, and with the same sound. His whole face became like his eyes. I am not packed off as easily as that, he said very softly. Not on a whim, even on a king's whim, and not in favour of a fool. Beware, Haggard. Mabruk is no one to anger lightly. A wind began to rise in the dark chamber. It came as much from one place as another, through the window, through the half-open door, but its true source was the clenched figure of the wizard. The wind was cold and rank, a wet, hooty marsh wind, and it leaped here and there in the room like a gleeful animal discovering the flimsiness of human beings. Molly shrank against Schmendrick, who looked uncomfortable. Prince Lear fidgeted his sword in and out of its sheath. Even King Haggard gave back a step before the triumphant grin of old Mabruk. The walls of the room seemed to thaw and run away, and the wizard's starry gown became the huge, howling night. Mabruk spoke no word himself, but the wind was beginning to make a wicked, grunting sound as it gained strength. In another moment it would become visible, burst into shape. Schmendrick opened his mouth, but if he were shouting a counterspell, it could not be heard, and it did not work. In the darkness, Molly saw the Lady Amalthea turning far away, stretching out a hand on which the ring and middle fingers were of equal length. The strange place on her forehead was glowing as bright as a flower. Then the wind was gone, as though it had never been, and the stone walls were around them once more, the dull chamber as gay as noon after Mabruk's night. The wizard was crouched almost to the floor, staring at the Lady Amalthea. His wise, benevolent face looked like the face of a drowned man, and his beard dripped thinly from his chin like stagnant water. Prince Lear took him by the arm. "Come on, old man," he said, not unkindly. "This way out, Grandad. I'll write you a reference." "I am going," Mabruk said, "not from fear of you, you lump of stale dough, nor of your mad, ungrateful father, nor of your new magician. Much happiness may you have of him." His eyes met King Haggard's hungry eyes, and he laughed like a goat. "Haggard, I would not be you for all the world," he declared. "You have let your doom in your front door, though it will not depart that way. I would explain myself more fully, but I am no longer in your service. That is a pity, for there will come a time when none but a master will be able to save you, and in that hour you will have Schmendrick to call upon. Farewell, poor Haggard. Farewell." Still laughing, he disappeared, but his mirth dwelled forever in the corners of that chamber, like the smell of smoke or of old, cold dust. "Well," said King Haggard in the grey moonlight. "Well." He came slowly toward Schmendrick and Molly, his feet silent, his head weaving almost playfully. "Stand still," he commanded when they moved. "I want to see your faces." His breath rasped like a knife on a grindstone as he peered from one of them to the other. "Closer," he grumbled, squinting through the dark. "Come closer, closer. I want to see you." "Light a light then," said Molly Grew. The calmness of her own voice frightened her more than the fury of the old wizard had. It is easy to be brave for her sake, she thought, but if I begin to be brave on my own account, where will it end? "I never light lights," the king replied. "What is the good of light?" He turned from them, muttering to himself. One face is almost guileless, almost foolish, but not quite foolish, enough. The other is a face like my face, and that must mean danger. Yet I saw all that at the gate. Why did I let them enter then? Marbrook was right. I have grown old and daft and easy. Still, I see only Haggard when I look in their eyes. Prince Lear stirred nervously as the king paced across the throne room toward the Lady Amalthea. She was again gazing out of the window, and King Haggard had drawn very near before she wheeled swiftly, lowering her head in a curious manner. "I will not touch you," he said, and she stood still. "Why do you linger at the window?" he demanded. "What are you looking at?" "I am looking at the sea," said the Lady Amalthea. Her voice was low and tremorous, not with fear, but with life, as a new butterfly shivers in the sun. "Ah," said the king. "Yes, the sea is always good. There is nothing that I can look at for very long except the sea." Yet he stared at the Lady Amalthea's face for a long time, his own face giving back none of her light, as Prince Lear's had, but taking it in and keeping it somewhere. His breath was as musty as the wizard's wind, but the Lady Amalthea never moved. Suddenly he shouted, "What is the matter with your eyes? They are full of green leaves, crowded with trees and streams and small animals. Where am I? Why can I not see myself in your eyes?" The Lady Amalthea did not answer him. King Haggard swung around to face Schmendrick and Molly. His scimitar smile laid its cold edge along their throats. "Who is she?" he demanded. Schmendrick coughed several times. "The Lady Amalthea is my niece," he offered. "I am her only living relative, and so her guardian. No doubt the state of her attire puzzles you, but it is easily explained. On our journey we were attacked by bandits and robbed of all our—" "What nonsense are you jabbering? What about her attire?" The king turned again to regard the white girl, and Schmendrick suddenly understood that neither King Haggard nor his son had noticed that she was naked. Oh, naked under the rags of his cloak. The lady Amalthea held herself so gracefully that she made shreds and tatters seem the only fitting dress for a princess, and besides, she did not know that she was naked. It was the armoured king who seemed bare before her. King Haggard said, "What she wears, what may have befallen you, what you all are to one another, these things are fortunately no concern of mine. In such matters you may lie to me as much as you dare. I want to know who she is. I want to know how she broke Mabrook's magic without saying a word. I want to know why there are green leaves and fox cubs in her eyes. Speak quickly and avoid the temptation to lie, especially about the green leaves. Answer me." Schmendrick did not reply quickly. He made a few sounds of an earnest nature, but not a sensible word was among them. Molly gathered her courage to answer, even though she suspected that it was impossible to speak the truth to King Haggard. Something in his winter presence blighted all words, tangled meanings, and bent honest intentions into shapes as tormented as the towers of his castle. Still she would have spoken, but another voice was heard in the gloomy chamber, the light, kind, silly voice of the young Prince Lear. "Father, what difference does it make? She is here now." King Haggard sighed. It was not a gentle sound, but low and scraping, not a sound of surrender, but the rumbling meditation of a tiger taught to spring. "Of course, you are right," he said. "She is here. We are all here, and whether they mean my doom or not, I will look at them for a while. A pleasant air of disaster awaits them. Perhaps that is what I want." To Schmendrick he said curtly, "As my magician, you will entertain me when I wish to be entertained in manners variously profound and frivolous. You will be expected to know when you are required and in what guise, for I cannot be forever identifying my moods and desires for your benefit. You will receive no wages, since that is certainly not what you came here for. As for your drab, your assistant, whatever you choose to call her, she will serve me also if she wishes to remain in my castle. From this evening she is cook and maidservant together, scrubwoman and scullery maid as well." He paused, seemingly waiting for Molly to protest, but she only nodded. The moon had moved away from the window, but Prince Lear could see that the dark room was no darker for that. The cool brightness of the Lady Amalthea grew more slowly than had Mabrook's wind, but the prince understood quite well that it was far more dangerous. He wanted to write poems by that light, and he had never wanted to write poems before. You must come and go as you please, said King Haggard to the Lady Amalthea. It may have been foolish of me to admit you, but I am not so foolish as to forbid you this door or that. My secrets guard themselves. Will yours do the same? By the gods, we have to plug in now because we're running low on battery. Charlie! Okay, you're in your cage. I have to worry because, spring is here, and with the warmer weather, the snakies are about, are they not? I really should be keeping an eye on her because a snake could move very, very quickly to feast on my beautiful girl, and that would be a hell of my own making for not watching over her. So it's a worry, people of Earth. It's a great worry, but sometimes birdies need their freedom too. Right, we shall plug in and finish off this video because I think I'm coming down either with an allergy or a cold. It was so very hot and then it got very cool, and that always makes me sick, always. Dramatic changes in temperature. I'm a sensitive little flower. Drives me nuts. Why I'm perpetually ill. Why that is, I don't know. It's just so very, very unfair. I need someone to give me $20 million and a hug and look after me for the rest of my life, but the chances of that happening are very, very unlikely, my darlings, since I keep fucking up every relationship I ever had. Oh, well, anyway, do not underestimate my power to continue to survive, even if it means I'm alone for the rest of my life. Am I right? Now, is this blessed thing working? Is it working? I'm scared to look. Yes, it's working. Right. We're still filming? Yes, we're still filming. So that is all very good. So on we go. My secrets guard themselves. Will yours do the same? What are you looking at? I'm looking at the sea, said the lady. The Lady Amalthea replied again. Yes, the sea is always good. We will look at it together one day. He walked slowly to the door. It will be curious, he said, to have a creature in the castle whose presence causes Lear to call me father for the first time since he was 5 years old. 6, said Prince Lear. I was 6. 5 or 6, the king said. It had stopped making me happy long before, and it does not make me happy now. Nothing has changed because she is here. Nothing has yet changed because she is here. He was gone almost as silently as Mabruk, and they heard his tin boots ticking on the stairs. Molly Grew went softly to the Lady Amalthea and stood by her at the window. What is it? She asked. What do you see? Schmendrick leaned on the throne, regarding Prince Lear with his long green eyes. Away in the valley of Hag's Gate, the cold roar sounded again. I will find quarters for you, said Prince Lear. Are you hungry? I will get you something to eat. I know where there is some cloth, fine satin. You could make a dress. No one answered him. The heavy night swallowed his words, and it seemed to him that the Lady Amalthea neither heard nor saw him. She did not move, and yet he was certain that she was going away from him as he stood there like the moon. Let me help you, Prince Lear said. What can I do for you? Let me help you. How much more have we got to go before I need to go to my psych? I think we might squeeze in one more chapter, my darlings. Chapter 10. What can I do for you? Prince Lear asked. Nothing very much just now, Molly Grew said. The water was all I needed, unless you want to peel the potatoes, which would be all right with me. No, I didn't mean that. I mean, yes, I will, if you want me to, but I was talking to her. I mean, when I talk to her, that's what I keep asking. Sit down and peel me a few potatoes, Molly said. It'll give you something to do with your hands. They were in the scullery, a dank little room smelling strongly of rotting turnips and fermenting beets. A dozen earthenware dishes were piled in one corner, and a very small fire was shivering under a tripod, trying to boil a large pot of grey water. Molly sat at a rude table which was covered with potatoes, leeks, onions, peppers, carrots, and other vegetables, most of them limp and spotty. Prince Lear stood before her, rocking slowly along his feet and twisting his big, soft fingers together. I killed another dragon this morning, he said presently. That's nice, Molly answered. That's fine. How many does that make now? 5. This one was smaller than the others, but it really gave me more trouble. I couldn't get near it on foot, so I had to go in with the lance, and my horse got pretty badly burned. It was funny about the horse, Molly interrupted him. Sit down, Your Highness, and stop doing that. I start to twitch all over just watching you. Prince Lear sat down opposite her. He drew a dagger from his belt and moodily began peeling potatoes. Molly regarded him with a slight, slow smile. I brought her the head, he said. She was in her chamber as she usually is. I dragged that head all the way up the stairs to lay it at her feet. He sighed and nicked his finger with the dagger. Damn, I didn't mind that. All the way up the stairs it was a dragon's head, the proudest gift anyone can give anyone. But when she looked at it, suddenly it became a sad, battered mess of scales and horns, gristly tongue, bloody eyes. I felt like some country butcher who had brought his lass a nice chunk of fresh meat as a token of his love. And then she looked at me, and I was sorry I had killed the thing. Sorry for killing a dragon. He slashed at a rubbery potato and wounded himself again. Cut away from yourself, not toward, Molly advised him. You know, I really think you should stop slaying dragons for the Lady Amalthea. If 5 of them haven't moved her, 1 more isn't likely to do it. Try something else. But what's left on earth that I haven't tried? Prince Lear demanded. I have swum 4 rivers, each in full flood, and none less than a mile wide. I have climbed 7 mountains, never before climbed, slept 3 nights in the marsh of the hanged men, and walked alive out of that forest where the flowers burn your eyes and the nightingales sing poison. I have ended my betrothal to the princess I had agreed to marry, and if you don't think that was a heroic deed, you don't know her mother. I have vanquished exactly 15 black knights waiting by 15 fords in their black pavilions, challenging all who come to cross. And I've long since lost count of the witches in the thorny woods, the giants, the demons disguised as damsels, the glass hills, fatal riddles and terrible tasks, the magic apples, rings, lamps, potions, swords, cloaks, boots, neckties, and nightcaps, not to mention the winged horses, the basilisks and sea serpents, and all the rest of the livestock. He raised his head, and the dark blue eyes were confused and sad. And all for nothing, he said. I cannot touch her, whatever I do. For her sake I have become a hero. I, sleepy Lear, my father's sport and shame. But I might just as well have remained the dull fool I was. My great deeds mean nothing to her. Molly took up her own knife and began to slice the peppers. Then perhaps the Lady Amalthea is not to be won by great deeds. The prince stared at her, frowning in puzzlement. Is there another way to win a maiden? He asked earnestly. Molly, do you know of another way? Will you tell it to me? He leaned across the table to seize her hand. I like being brave well enough, but I will be a lazy coward again if you think that would be better. The sight of her makes me want to do battle with all evil and ugliness, but it also makes me want to sit still and be unhappy. What should I do, Molly? I don't know, she said, suddenly embarrassed. Kindness, courtesy, good works, that sort of thing. A good sense of humour. A small copper and ashes cat with a crooked ear jumped into her lap, purring thunderously and leaning against her hand. Hoping to change the subject, she asked, What about your horse? What was funny? Oh, I've got such funny thoughts today. There's mischief afoot. I can sense it. But Prince Lear was staring at the little cat with the crooked ear. Where did he come from? Is he yours? No, Molly said. I just feed him and hold him sometimes. She stroked the cat's thin throat and it closed his eyes. I thought he lived here. The prince shook his head. My father hates cats. He says that there is no such thing as a cat. It is just a shape that all manner of imps, hobs, and devilkins like to put on to gain easy entrance into the homes of men. He would kill it if he knew you had it here. What about the horse? Molly asked. Prince Lear's face grew glum again. That was strange. When she took no delight in the gift itself, I thought she might be interested to hear how it was won. So I told her about the view and the charge, about the hissing and the naked wings and the way dragons smell, especially on a rainy morning, and the way the black blood jumped at the point of my lance. But she heard none of it, not a word, until I spoke of the rush of fire that nearly burned my poor horse's legs from under him. Then she came back from wherever she goes when I talk to her, and she said that she must go and see my horse. So I led her to the stable where the poor brute stood crying with the pain, and she put her hand on him, on his legs, and he stopped moaning. That's a terrible sound they make when they're really hurt. When they stop, it's like a song. The prince's dagger lay glittering among the potatoes. Outside, great gusts of rain growled round and round the castle walls, but those in the scullery could only hear it, for there was not a single window in the cold room. Nor was there any light except for the meagre glow of the cooking fire. It made the cat dozing in Molly's lap look like a heap of autumn leaves. And what happened then, she asked, when the Lady Amalthea touched your horse? Nothing happened, nothing at all. Prince Lear suddenly seemed to become angry. He slammed his hand down on the table, and leeks and lentils and leaped in all directions. Did you expect something to happen? She did. Did you expect the beast's burns to heal on the instant, the crackling skin to knit, the black flesh to be whole again? She did. By my hope of her, I swear it. And when his legs didn't grow well under her hand, then she ran away. I don't know where she is now. His voice softened as he spoke, and the hand on the table curled sadly on its side. He rose and went to look into the pot over the fire. It's boiling, he said, if you want to put the vegetables in. She wept when my horse's legs did not heal. I heard her weeping, and yet there were no tears in her eyes when she ran away. Everything else was there, but no tears. Molly put the cat gently on the floor and began gathering the venerable vegetables for the pot. Prince Lear watched her as she moved back and forth around the table and across the dewy floor. She was singing. If I danced with my feet as I dance in my dreaming, as graceful and gleaming as death in disguise, oh, that would be sweet. But then would I hunger to be 10 years younger, or wedded, or wise. Do not entrap yourself to be wedded. Remain wise. There is great magic afoot, and someone is trying to entrap the Tanya, who must always and forever remain wild and wise. My handsome, talented, most beloved ones. The prince said, "Who is she, Molly? What kind of woman is it who believes, who knows for her, for I saw her face?" Strippers indeed. That she can cure wounds with a touch, and who weeps without tears. Molly went on about her work, still humming to herself. Any woman can weep without tears. She answered over her shoulder, and most can heal with their hands. It depends on the wound. She is a woman, Your Highness, and that's riddle enough. But, indeed it is. But the prince stood up to bar her way, and she stopped, her apron full of herbs and her hair trailing into her eyes. Prince Lear's face bent toward her, older by 5 dragons, but handsome and silly still. Where are we? Some idiots trying to ring me. I've told them I'm not available for them to come and do the stairs till Thursday, and they're still badgering me. I hate that, being badgered by idiots. Dear goddess. This is why I put off getting those steps fixed for so long. My goddess. It's infuriating. Anyway, I must be patient with them. They're not all in their right mind anymore. Can't understand plain English, or refuse to understand plain English, which is worse. Dear goddess. Handsome and silly still, yes. He said, you sing. My father sets you to the weariest work there is to do, and still you sing. There has never been singing in this castle, or cats, or the smell of good cooking. It is the Lady Amalthea who causes this, as she causes me to ride out in the morning, seeking danger. I was always a fair cook, Molly said mildly, living in the green wood with Cully and his men for 17 years. Prince Lear continued as though she had not spoken. I want to serve her as you do, to help her find whatever she has come here to find. I wish to be whatever she has most need of. Tell her so. Will you tell her so? Ah, bless. A man in love is a delight to behold, especially when it's true and he cleaves to you like glue, babies. But I shall learn the mean of the last unicorn and give out 0 fucks. Or will I? To be continued. I was always a fair cook, Molly said mildly, living in the green wood with Cully and his men for 17 years. Prince Lear continued as though she had not spoken. I want to serve her as you do, to help her find whatever she has come here to find. I wish to be whatever she has most need of. Tell her so, will you tell? I already read that, dear goddess. We're lost in our own story, in our own mind, spinning in infinity. So many tricksters and lies and deceivers. Am I right? Well, 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 well. The truth remains the truth, how many times you cut and splice it. And Mama T is gifted by the gods that the truth is always unravelled and unswirled and unfurled and comes to lie at my feet with open honesty and a beautiful regard at the end, always and forever. That has been my fate, and you're very, very late for a very important date. Where were we? Let us continue. Even as he spoke, a soundless step sounded in his eyes, and the sigh of a satin gown troubled his face. The lady Amalthea stood in the doorway. A season in King Haggard's chill domain had not dimmed or darkened her. Rather, the winter had sharpened her beauty until it invaded the beholder like a barbed arrow that could not be withdrawn. Her white hair was caught up with a blue ribbon, and her gown was lilac. It did not fit her well. Molly Grew was an indifferent seamstress, and satin made her nervous. But the Lady Amalthea seemed more lovely for the poor work, for the cold stones and the smell of turnips. There was rain in her hair. Prince Lear bowed to her, a quick, crooked bow, as though someone had hit him in his stomach. "My lady," he mumbled, "you really should cover your head when you go out this weather." The Lady Amalthea sat down at the table, and the little autumn-coloured cat immediately sprang up before her, purring swiftly and very softly. She put out her hand, but the cat slid away, still purring. He did not appear frightened, but he would not let her touch his rusty fur. The Lady Amalthea beckoned, and the cat wriggled all over like a dog that he would not come near. But he would not come near. Prince Lear said hoarsely, "I must go. There is an ogre of some sort devouring village maidens 2 days' ride from here. It is said that he can be slain only by one who wields the great axe of Duke Alban. Unfortunately, Duke Alban himself was one of the first consumed. He was dressed as a village maiden at the time to deceive the monster, and there is little doubt who holds the great axe now. If I do not return, think of me. Farewell." "Farewell, your highness," Molly said. The prince bowed again and left the scullery on his noble errand. He looked back only once. "You are cruel to him," Molly said. The Lady Amalthea did not look up. She was offering her open palm to the crook-eared cat, but he stayed where he was, shivering with the desire to go to her. "Cruel?" she asked. "How can I be cruel?" This is a very fucking long chapter, isn't it? Oh dear goddess. "That is for mortals." And then she did raise her eyes, and they were great with sorrow and with something very near to mockery. She said, "So is kindness." Molly Grew busied herself with the cooking pot, stirring the soup and seasoning it, bustling numbly. In a low voice she remarked, "You might give him a gentle word at the very least. He has undergone mighty trials for you." But what word shall I speak? Asked the Lady Amalthea. I have said nothing to him, yet every day he comes to me with more heads, more horns, and hides, and tails, more enchanted jewels, and bewitched weapons. What will he do if I speak? Molly said, He wishes you to think of him. Knights and princes know only one way to be remembered. It's not his fault. I think he does very well. The Lady Amalthea turned her eyes to the cat again. Her long fingers twisted at a seam of the satin gown. No, he does not want my thoughts, she said softly. He wants me as much as the Red Bull did, and with no more understanding. But he frightens me even more than the Red Bull, because he has a kind heart. No, I will never speak a promising word to him. The pale mark on her brow was invisible in the gloom of the scullery. She touched it and then drew her hand away quickly, as though the mark could hurt her. The horse died, she said to the little cat. I could do nothing. Molly turned quickly and put her hands on the Lady Amalthea's shoulders. Beneath the sleek cloth, the flesh was cold and hard as any stone of King Haggard's castle. Oh, my lady, she whispered, that is because you are out of your true form. When you regain yourself, it will all return, all your power, all your strength, all your sureness. It will come back to you. Had she dared, she would have taken the white girl in her arms and lulled her like a child. She had never dreamed of such a thing before. But the Lady Amalthea answered, The magician gave me only the semblance of a human being, the seeming, but not the spirit. If I had died then, I would still have been a unicorn. The old man knew the wizard. He said nothing to spite Haggard, but he knew. Of itself, her hair escaped the blue ribbon and came hurrying down her neck and over her shoulders. The cat was all but won by this eagerness. He lifted a paw to play with it, but then he drew back once more and sat on his haunches. Tail curled around his front feet, queer head to the side. His eyes were green, speckled with gold. But that was long ago, the girl said. Now I am two, myself and this other that you call my lady. For she is here as truly as I am now, though once she was only a veil over me. She walks in the castle, she sleeps, she dresses herself, she takes her meals, and she thinks her own thoughts. If she has no power to heal or to quiet, still she has another magic. Men speak to her saying, Lady Amalthea, and she answers them, or she does not answer. The king is always watching her out of his pale eyes, wondering what she is. And the king's son wounds himself with loving her and wonders who she is. And every day she searches the sea and the sky, the castle and the courtyard and the keep and the king's face for something she cannot always remember. What is it? What is it that she is seeking in this strange place she knew a moment ago, but she has forgotten? She turned her face to Molly Grew, and her eyes were not the unicorn's eyes. They were lovely still, but in a way that had a name, as a human woman is beautiful. Their depth could be sounded and learned, and their degree of darkness was quite describable. Molly saw fear and loss and bewilderment when she looked into them and herself and nothing more. Unicorns, she said, the Red Bull has driven them all away, all but you. You are the last unicorn. You came here to find the others and to set them free, and so you will. Slowly the deep secret sea returned to the Lady Amalthea's eyes, filling them until they were as old and dark and unknowable and indescribable as the sea. Molly watched it happen and was afraid, but she gripped the bowed shoulders even more tightly, as though her hands could draw despair like a lightning rod, and as she did so there shivered in the scullery floor a sound she had heard before, a sound like great teeth, molars grinding together. The Red Bull was turning in his sleep. I wonder if he dreams, Molly thought. The Lady Amalthea said, I must go to him. There is no other way and no time to spare. In this form or my own, I must face him again, even if all my people are dead and there is nothing to be saved. I must go to him before I forget myself forever, but I do not know the way, and I am lonely. The little cat switched his tail and made an odd sound that was neither a meow nor a purr. I will go with you, Molly said. I don't know the way down to the bull either, but there must be one. Schmendrick will come too. He'll make the way for us if we can't find it. I hope for no help from the magician, the Lady Amalthea replied disdainfully. I see him every day playing the fool for King Haggard, amusing him by his failures, by blundering at even the most trifling trick. He says that it is all he can do until his power speaks in him again. But it never will. He is no magician now, but the king's clown. Molly's face suddenly hurt her, and she turned away to inspect the soup again. Answering past a sharpness in her throat, she said, He is doing it for you. While you brood and mope and become someone else, he jigs and jests for Haggard, diverting him so that you may have time to find your folk, if they are to be found. But it cannot be long before the king tires of him, as he tires of all things, and casts him down to his dungeons or some place darker. You do wrong to mock him. Her face was a child's thin, sad mumble. She said, But that will never happen to you. Everyone loves you. They had a moment to look at each other, the two women, the one fair and foreign in the cold, low room, the other appearing quite at home in such surroundings, an angry little beetle with her own kitchen beauty. Then they heard boots scraping, armour clicking, and the gusty voices of old men. King Haggard's 4 men-at-arms came trooping into the scullery. They were all at least 70 years old, gaunt and limping, fragile as crusted snow, but all clad from head to foot in King Haggard's miserly mail and bearing his wry weapons. They entered, hailing Molly Grew cheerfully, and asked what she had made for their supper, but at the sight of the lady Amalthea, all 4 became very quiet and bowed deep bows that made them gasp. "My lady," said the oldest of the men. I'm just going to check the time. One moment. I have 1 hour. Hopefully it'll be finished before then, though. "My lady," said the oldest of the men, "command your servants. We are used men, spent men, but if you would see miracles, you have only to request the impossible of us. We will become young again, if you wish it so." His 3 comrades muttered their agreement, but the lady Amalthea whispered in answer, "No, no, you will never be young again." Then she fled from them, with her wild, blinding hair hiding her face, and the satin gown hissing. "How wise she is," the oldest man-at-arms declared. "She understands that not even her beauty can do battle with time. It is a rare, sad wisdom for one so young. That soup smells delicious, Molly." "It smells too savoury for this place," a second man grumbled as they all sat down around the table. "Haggard hates good food. He says that no meal is good enough to justify all the money and effort wasted in preparing it. It is an illusion, says he, and an expense. Live as I do, undeceived." "Brah!" he shuddered and grimaced, and the others laughed. "To live like Haggard," said another man-at-arms as Molly spooned the steaming soup into his bowl. "That will be my fate in the next world if I don't behave myself in this one." "Why do you stay in his service then?" Molly demanded. She sat down with him and rested her chin on her hands. "He pays you no wages," she said, "and he feeds you as little as he dares. He sends you out in the worst weather to steal for him in Hagsgate, for he never spends a penny of the wealth in his strong room. He forbids everything, from lights to lutes, from fires to fairs and singing to sinning, from books and beer and talk of spring to games you play with bits of string. Why not leave him? What in the world is there to keep you here?" The 4 old men looked nervously at one another, coughing and sighing. The first said, "It is our age. Where else could we go? We are too old to be wandering the roads looking for work and shelter." "It is our age," said the second man-at-arms. "When you are old, anything that does not disturb you is a comfort. Cold and darkness and boredom long ago lost their sharp edges for us, but warmth, singing, spring, no, they would all be disturbances. There are worse things than living like Haggard. The third man said, Haggard is older than we are. In time, Prince Lear will be king in this country, and I will not leave the world until I have seen that day. I have always been fond of the boy since he was small. Molly found that she was not hungry. She looked around at the faces of the old men and listened to the sounds their seamy lips and shrunken throats made as they drank her soup, and she was suddenly glad that King Haggard always had his meals alone. Molly inevitably came to care for anyone she fed. Cautiously, she asked them, Have you ever heard a tale that Prince Lear is not Haggard's adopted nephew at all? The men-at-arms showed no surprise at the question. Aye, the eldest replied. We know that story. It may well be true, for the prince certainly bears no family resemblance to the king. But what of it? Better a stolen stranger ruled the land than a true son of King Haggard. But if the prince was stolen from Hag's Gate, Molly cried, then he is the man who will make the curse on this castle come true. And she repeated the rhyme that the man Drin had recited in the inn at Hag's Gate. Yet none but one of Hag's Gate town may bring the castle swirling down. But the old men shook their heads, grinning with teeth as rusty as their casques and corselets. Not Prince Lear, the third man said. The prince may slay 1,000 dragons, but he will level no castles, overthrow no kings. It is not in his nature. He is a dutiful son who seeks, alas, only to be worthy of the man he calls his father. Not Prince Lear. The rhyme must speak of some other. And even if Prince Lear were the one, the second man added, even if the curse had marked him for his messenger, still he would fail. For between King Haggard and any doom stands the Red Bull. A silence sprang into the room and stood there, darkening all faces with its savage shadow and chilling the good hot soup with its breath. The little autumn cat stopped purring on Molly's lap, and the thin cooking fire cowered down. The cold scullery walls seemed to draw closer together. The fourth man-at-arms, who had not spoken before, called across the dark to Molly Grew. There is the true reason that we stay in Haggard's employ. He does not wish us to leave, and what King Haggard wishes or does not wish is the only concern of the Red Bull. We are Haggard's minions, but we are the Red Bull's prisoners. Molly's hand was steady as she stroked the cat, but her voice was pinched and dry when she spoke. What is the Red Bull to King Haggard? 'Twas the oldest man-at-arms who answered, We do not know. The bull has always been here. It serves Haggard as his army and his bulwark. It is his strength and the source of his strength, and it must be his one companion as well, for I am sure he descends to its lair betimes, down some secret stair. But whether it obeys Haggard from choice or compulsion, or whether the bull or the king is the master, that we have never known. The fourth man, who was the youngest and leaned towards Molly Grew, his pink, wet eyes suddenly eager. He said, The Red Bull is a demon, and its reckoning for attending Haggard will one day be Haggard himself. Another man interrupted him, insisting that the clearest evidence showed that the bull was King Haggard's enchanted slave, and would be until it broke the bewitchment that held it and destroyed its former lord. They began to shout and spill their soup. But Molly asked, not loudly, but in a way that made them all be still, "Do you know what a unicorn is? Have you ever seen one?" Of everything alive in the little room, only the cat and the silence seemed to look back at her with any understanding. The four men blinked and belched and rubbed their eyes. Deep, restless, the sleeping bull stirred again. The meal being over, the men-at-arms saluted Molly Grew and left the scullery, two for their beds, two to take up their night's vigil in the rain. The oldest of the men waited until the others were gone before he said quietly to Molly, "Be careful of the Lady Amalthea. When she first came here, her beauty was such that even this accursed castle became beautiful too, like the moon, which is only a shining stone. But she has been here too long. Now she is as beautiful as ever, but the rooms and roofs that contain her are somehow meaner for her presence." He gave a long sigh, which frayed into a whine. "I am familiar with that kind of beauty," he said, "but I had never seen that other sort before. Be careful of her. She should go away from here." Alone, Molly put her face in the little cat's random fur. The cooking fire fluttered low, but she did not get up to feed it. Small, swift creatures scuttled across the room, making a sound like King Haggard's voice, and the rain rumbled against the castle walls, sounding like the Red Bull. Then, as though in answer, she heard the bull. His bellow shattered the stones under her feet, and she clutched desperately at the table to keep herself and the cat from plunging down to him. She cried out. The cat said, "He is going out. He goes out every sundown to hunt for the strange white beast that escaped him. You know that perfectly well. Don't be stupid." The hungering roar came again, further away. Molly caught her breath and stared at the little cat. She was not as amazed as another might have been. These days she was harder to surprise than most women. "Could you always talk?" she asked the cat. "Or was it the sight of the Lady Amalthea that gave you speech?" The cat licked a front paw reflectively. "It was the sight of her that made me feel like talking," he said at length. "But let us leave it at that. So that is a unicorn. She is very beautiful." "How do you know she is a unicorn?" Molly demanded. "And why were you afraid to let her touch you? I saw you. You were afraid of her." "I doubt that I will feel like talking for so very long," the cat replied without rancour. "I would not waste time in foolishness if I were you. As to your first question, no cat out of its first fur can ever be deceived by appearances, unlike human beings who enjoy them. As for your second question," here he faltered and suddenly became very interested in washing, nor would he speak until he licked himself fluffy and then licked himself smooth again. Even then he would not look at Molly, but examined his claws. "If she had touched me," he said very softly, "I would have been hers and not my own, not ever again. I wanted her to touch me, but I would not let her. No cat will. We let human beings caress us because it is pleasant enough and calms them, but not her. The price is more than a cat can pay." Molly picked him up, and he purred into her neck for such a long while that she began to fear that his moment of speech had passed. But presently he said, "You will have very little time. Soon she will no longer remember who she is or why she came to this place, and the Red Bull will no longer roar in the night for her. It may be that she will marry the good prince who loves her." The cat pushed his head hard into Molly's suddenly still hand. "Do that," he commanded. "The prince is very brave to love a unicorn. A cat can appreciate valiant absurdity." "No," Molly Grew said. "No, that cannot be. She is the last." "Well then, she must do what she came to do," the cat replied. "She must take the king's way down to the bull." Molly held him so fiercely that he gave a mouse-like squeak of protest. "Do you know the way?" she asked, as eagerly as King Lear had demanded of her. "Tell me the way. Tell me where we must go." She put the cat down on the table and took her hands off him. The cat made no answer for a long time, but his eyes grew brighter and brighter, gold shivering down to cover the green. His crooked ear twitched, and the black tip of his tail, and nothing more. "When the wine drinks itself," he said, "when the skull speaks, when the clock strikes the right time, only then will you find the tunnel that leads to the Red Bull's lair." He tucked his paws under his chest and added, "There's a trick to it, of course." "I'll bet," Molly said grimly. "There is a horrible, crumbly old skull stuck up high on a pillar in the great hall, but it hasn't had anything to say for some time. The clock that stands nearby is mad and strikes when it pleases, midnight every hour, 17 o'clock at 4, or perhaps not a sound for a week. And the wine, oh cat, wouldn't it be simpler just to show me the tunnel? You know where it is, don't you?" "Of course I know," answered the cat with a glinting, curling yawn. "Of course it would be simpler for me to show you. save a lot of time and trouble. His voice was becoming a sleepy drawl, and Molly realised that, like King Haggard himself, he was losing interest. Quickly she asked him, "Tell me one thing, then. What became of the unicorns? Where are they?" The cat yawned again. "Near and far, far and near," he murmured. "They are within sight of your lady's eyes, but almost out of reach of her memory. They are coming closer, and they are going away." He closed his eyes. Molly's breath came like rope fretting against her harsh throat. "Damn you! Why won't you help me?" she cried. "Why must you always speak in riddles?" "I hear you, sister. I hate people that can't be upfront with the truth." One eye opened slowly, green and gold as sunlight in the woods. The cat said, "I am what I am. I would tell you what you want to know if I could, for you have been kind to me. But I am a cat, and no cat anywhere ever gave anyone a straight answer." His last few words drowsed away into a deep, regular purr, and he was asleep with the one eye partly open. Molly held him on her lap and stroked him, and he purred in his sleep, but he did not speak again. And now we finish here. We're up to chapter 11, and there's still quite a bit to be read. Enough for one more video, methinks. I hope you're enjoying this as much as I am, but I'm very tired now, and I have my debrief at 2, so on I must go to my next adventure, and I bid you adieu and anew, and tomorrow I will make the last video of the last unicorn, and thus this mission will have been completed. Bye for now from sacred space at Titania's realm, where the magic never ceases to happen, babies. And all deceptions will be unravelled and unwoven and declared true.